The emergence of the Web3 basically means that we're building a decentralized peer-to-peer economy and a decentralized version of the current internet, in which we have peer-to-peer networks without the requirement to trust middlemen who are also making money in the same time. So today I have the real pleasure to be talking with David, who is the co-founder at Saito, because what Saito is trying to build is a middle layer, a meta layer for the Web3 that is also improving data throughput, data reliability, and most importantly, it breaks up the business model of centralized systems like we know from the traditional internet, but also from the crypto space, such as Infura, for example. And guys, quick disclaimer here, this is a sponsored episode today, but I really encourage you to watch the entire video because there's so much value in it, especially the part where we talk about the Web3 and David goes really deep down that rabbit hole, explaining what the main challenges are for the Web3 and what true decentralization actually means. So I have learned really a lot during our conversation. I really enjoyed it. David is super knowledgeable and really deep into what he does. So that said, make sure you also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you also like and share this video with 1 or 2 friends just to raise more awareness on the Web3, on cryptocurrencies, on blockchain, on decentralized ledger technologies, all those juicy, cool things. And also make sure that you watch this entire thing. All right. So I'm joined today by David, who is the co-founder of Saito, who is aiming to resolve the Infura problem for the crypto space, pivoting also towards the Polkadot ecosystem. And yeah, we'll get into all of that in today's video, in today's session. But first things first, David, you're tuning in from Thailand. How is everything going?
Thailand is wonderful. I'm joining you from quarantine because we're here for another 10 days. So have as much time of mine as you want.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, before we get into all details around the project and your kind of solution, and I think also regarding the token, some people in your community are also super excited about it. Why don't you start with giving some context around yourself in terms of crypto background, crypto journey, but also the team, and most importantly, I want to know like how did you all come together, right? How did you all meet? What is your story?
Sure. I guess personally, my background is a combination of crypto stuff, but also interestingly economics. So, it's kind of weird knowing a lot about Keynes and being in the crypto sphere and thinking, actually Keynes would really like Bitcoin, I think. Um, uh, Found myself in China. I was living and working in China, and that's really how I got into crypto. Back then, about 2012, 2013, it was really just Bitcoin. So got some, played around with it, coded some apps, and I think when people get into the crypto community, it takes a little bit of time, and then eventually you just know everyone. And so we got really involved in the blockchain debate. And all of the arguments going back and forward with can we scale, what are the trade-offs, and that led eventually in 2017 to coming up with a solution. And it's the Saito solution, which we'll talk about here. And as soon as we had that, nothing else made sense to do. I think people will realize that as they learn more about Saito. Richard, I'd met him, I guess, about 6 years earlier. We were both based in China. We were going backwards and back and forth about the nature of the solution and how it would work. And I quit what I was doing and started coding. Richard quit what he was doing and came on board. And that's basically what we've been doing for the last 2 to 3 years, which is building out the test network, making sure it works, building a community, getting scale up. And that brings us to where we are today, which I'm delighted to talk about.
So how big is the team currently, and where do you guys currently stand in terms of like just from a team perspective?
Well, we've got about three core members, meaning myself, Richard, and we've got someone else who's come on and helping us with lead development. We've got some distributed people that are helping with community management, reach out. As you can see, we've also got, if people visit the Saito Arcade, we've got users in an actual community. So,
Hmm.
uh,
Interesting.
there's a lot of stuff happening. A lot of people that I'd say are on the team aren't even on the team, so to speak. They just really like what's happening and want Saito to succeed. So,
Interesting. Um, and also, one thing that comes really clear, like when you also just visit a website, is that you received a Web3 grant, right, from the Web3 Association or Foundation. Can you
mhm.
talk us through how, like, what that means first of all, and then also how connected you are within the Polkadot ecosystem, and also why you are pivoting Saito towards the Polkadot ecosystem?
Sure. I think those are probably two questions.
Yeah, or
The
three.
Web grant, the Web3 grant's really interesting because one of the things Saito is that people need to know is Saito, we're really focused on applications. So Saito as a network is, the applications, they're not smart contracts. They're not running on the blockchain. What you have is you have a network where anyone can take data and add it into a transaction. And then they can broadcast that transaction to everyone on the network, and anyone else can listen and receive the message. And so what you can start doing is you can start doing these really interesting things that even cryptographers invented in the 1970s. Like there's this, you've heard of the RSA, public key, private key cryptography invention, right? A lot of people don't know that these guys actually invented a way to play poker that doesn't involve a casino. So you can use public key and private key cryptography to do things like shuffle a deck of cards,
Mm,
and it's just you and the person you're playing with. There's no smart contract, there's no casino. And today in crypto, when people think about gaming, mostly that's what they're thinking of. Oh, the casino is proving to us that it's being fair. And the kind of applications and games that we're developing atop Sato, they don't have this at all. There's no casino. It's literally just you and the opponent. And we're doing this stuff, and it's Web3 because it's a Web3 application. Um, Other examples are like if you wanted to do Instagram or WeChat, you can do things like you can do a key exchange over the blockchain. So I know that you've proved you're you, and I've proved that I'm me, and there's no one that can listen in the middle. And I can do something like I can send you my IP address that's encrypted, and we use the blockchain to connect, and then we've got this really secure way of me sending you Facebook posts or Instagram pictures. I can watermark them if I want. And so Sato's doing these kind of apps, and that led us to the Web3 Foundation, which is supporting them. And so what we're doing with the Web3 Foundation is basically we're creating a standard protocol for the gaming layer, so that people can do things like play poker, so they can do things like play board games without these other casinos. And we're leading a standard in this. If people are interested, they should come to sato.io/arcade, and they can actually play games with peers right in their browser. So people can get a real sense of what's happening.
yeah, that's very interesting. And one thing that you mentioned, and I also keep talking about this in my videos, is Web3. But I think it's super important to really explain people also what that actually means and
Yeah.
why it's so important, or basically what are the core elements of the Web3. So maybe from your view, you can elaborate on that and your understanding of Web3 and
Sure.
how also Sado plugs into that.
Sure. I mean, all of these blockchains and cryptographic networks, you've got a private key and you've got a public key, and you're identified by that public key. So what Web3 is replacing is the idea that I've got a Google account or I've got a Facebook account, and there's some company that's managing the database. And the big problem is if you have a company managing the database, they're going to use that database for their own business model. And what blockchain really is it's this open network. And the idea is that anyone can take part and you're not going to be discriminated against. And this is actually kind of going to get to the Infura problem we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
because the really big challenge as these networks grow is that we need somebody to pay for all of this stuff that we're not paying for, right? Like blockchains, they'll pay miners and they'll pay stakers, and we get lots of that. But who's doing all of this other stuff? And paying for that's a big challenge. But what Web3 is doing is it's saying, look, we don't need Google, we don't need Facebook if we've got these open networks that can survive, and if they can survive without an owner. And that's really, for us, it's the really revolutionary thing about blockchain. You know, people get excited about, oh, it's digital money. And it's like, well, the reason it can be digital money is because it's trustless. And the reason it's trustless is because the network pays for itself. So we don't need to worry about Google owning it or Facebook owning it, and we don't need to worry about them abandoning it, because if they abandon it, someone else will step in and run it too. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think Web3, like, and you summed it up really really nicely, is basically the emergence of peer-to-peer networks, right? Peer-to-peer
yeah,
ecosystems, where
yeah.
we hopefully get rid of big tech, right? Of those large companies that are controlling and basically controlling the entire internet.
we,
So
we get rid of their business models because, like, think of the Apple App Store. The App Store is a PKI network. All that is when you're uploading an app, you're signing it with this private key that they've given you, and they say, well, we know you're that key. And what they say is, they say they run the App Store. They're controlling it. So they're saying you can't publish this kind of app. Oh,
mm,
you publish that app, you can't advertise in that kind of app. And
mm,
it's those kind of business models we can say, no, go away.
mm,
We're not letting you decide what you can put on my phone. We're not letting you decide what my business model is. And that's what the openness and the non-excludable part of the network brings us. A lot of people, they focus on, oh, Bitcoin's money and stuff. It's like, it's really, really a lot bigger. It's this open network where no one else can tell you what your business model needs to be. And that's why it's going to be huge, because it's going to outcompete all of these private company databases, because their business model is going to get in the way and make them uncompetitive. It's sort of like those early internet systems like Sierra Online or AOL, where it was a walled garden. And then the internet, as it grew, it's like openness. You can do whatever you want on the internet, and it just steamrolled all of them. So,
yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think as we're breaking the business model of those companies, it also opens up huge ways for small guys like us to just also get involved, also have a little bit of
yeah.
run a node, have control, or have a say, have a vote at least, right? And also earn
Yeah.
some passive income at the same time.
Yeah, like there's so many business models that are possible on
Yeah,
phones when you don't rely on Google Play and Apple to decide what those apps are allowed to do.
yeah.
You know, um,
All right, so
absolutely.
let's get now more specifically into you already mentioned it, the Infura problem that you also have on your website. It's kind of like your guys' punchline to make it also more tangible for the crypto community, but also for the non-crypto community. Can you elaborate on what that means, what Infura is, and what issues they had in the past that you want to resolve?
Sure. The problem is, basically, in a nutshell, it's this: when Bitcoin started, Bitcoin's peer-to-peer network was run by volunteers, right? So if you want to get a copy of the chain, you want to find out how much money you have, you find a volunteer and you go to them and you say, give me the data. And when the network is super small, you can do that because they're volunteers. And the big economic problem in blockchain is, people say, well, we can't keep these networks small. And there's a debate with Bitcoin about, can you do it with digital gold? With Saito, we're looking at applications, and application data is huge. And volunteers will not run application scale uh, networks. Like, some people will say, oh, well, we can put it on IPFS. It's like, IPFS is run by volunteers. There's no guarantee that your data is going to stay around. So the big economic problem is, we're moving from these volunteer networks to
Mm,
these networks that cost an incredible amount of money to run. And people don't even, we're talking about petabytes. We're talking about massive, massive amounts of data, where the costs, it's not mining and staking. The cost is running the network and getting people that data. Now, what Infura is the Ethereum solution to this. And what they did basically is Joe Lubin started a company at Consensus. And all of the applications, let's say if you use an Ethereum application in your browser, you're likely using something called MetaMask. And what MetaMask does is it doesn't live on the blockchain. It it's like a piece of software plug-in in your browser that contacts this company called Infura. And Infura has all of these databases. And they check the data in the database. They don't go and check it on chain. And then they give you the data you want from their database. And what's Infura paying for? Well, one, they're paying for these massive databases because they're indexing the entire state of the smart contracts over history. Super, super expensive. They're losing an incredible amount of money every month, but they're funded by the guys that started Ethereum, so they've got a ton of money to lose. They're also spending a lot in bandwidth for users. And MetaMask, this browser plugin, they recently went closed source because everyone who's in this user-facing side of the network, they need to get paid because Infura can't be a volunteer. MetaMask is just passing its costs to Infura, right? They're like, well, we're a browser plugin, but you're connecting to them. And the Infura problem is, as these networks grow, somebody needs to pay for all of this data, the user-facing network. And proof of work and proof of stake, which are the two mainstream, the big consensus systems, they pay for mining and they pay for staking. And in the early days, people would say, oh, that's fine. Miners are going to pay for this stuff. Stakers are going to pay for this stuff, or else they're not going to make any money. And that's actually wrong. That's bad economics. Economists have known this doesn't work since the 1960s. And what we've seen is that empirically, the economists are right. If you look at Ethereum, you've got all of these miners. None of them are supporting the users. They're like, you go to Infura. And so the big question is, how does Infura make its money? And one of the big problems is if you're asking the private sector to run companies like Infura, you need them to have a business model. And that business model is almost always eating the profits that they can make from controlling that connection with the user.
Mm.
Like you're sending them transactions, they're going to take a cut of that transaction fee, or they're going to charge you an extra fee. Both solutions are really bad. If they're charging an extra fee, the costs of using the network are going way up. If they start eating a little bit of the transaction fee, like Infura, the stats we heard at the Stanford Blockchain Conference is well over 80% of the transactions that go into Ethereum go through Infura.
Wow.
Well, you know, it's totally crazy. It's their dirty, dark secret because you know, you're a 50% attack on Bitcoin, you've got an 80% attack on the network right here. Because what happens when Infura says our business model is staking? And we're going to put these transactions into our blocks. And all of a sudden, the things that people assume, they assume that this is going to happen. They're like, oh, well, Infura is not going to attack the network. It's like Infura is going to do what it can to make money. And as soon as they start monetizing the flow of transactions, there are things that they can't do. They can't make money from them and also share them with everyone. So there are a lot of technical things that start going wrong because not all of the nodes can see all of these unconfirmed transactions. And some stakers are making a lot more money than other stakers. And what happens when there's an entire school of economics devoted to these problems. It's called public choice theory. And what happens is the openness of the network starts shrinking and we start getting these monopolies emerge. And the big guys make a lot more money than the small guys. And the question is, well, what does this do to your network in a decade? And from Sato's perspective, we look at blockchain, and this is what we're seeing with every single proof of work and proof of stake projects that's scaling. We're starting to get these big monopolies forming in the network layer. And the developers are saying, isn't this great? The private sector is going to run our blockchain. And well, the private sector in Ethereum, if it's running 80% of your blockchain, you've got real issues. And the problem is going to get worse. And so what they're really saying is they're saying, well, the openness that we used to have, it's okay if we lose that. And we don't think it's okay. Because if you lose that, you lose trustlessness. You
Right.
end up being regulated by the state, you know?
So
So
before you get into how you guys resolve it, can you so what do you think Ethereum should do right now, or what do you think like how they could resolve that?
Ethereum should learn how Saito works. Ethereum does not have a road. They don't, no, they don't have a roadmap for solving this problem. What
Wow.
they do is they, there's a wonderful paper Vitalik came out with in 2018 on discouragement attacks, where he walked down to the economic layer and he looked at it and like, Nietzsche looking in the abyss, he said, I can't solve this. And he went back upstairs and he started tweaking around with meaningless stuff.
Hmm.
The bottom layer is economic. If you've got an economic problem, that's the most important problem.
Yeah.
You're tweaking stuff upstairs, you're not solving the problem.
Yeah.
And so what Ethereum is doing is they say, oh, there's technical trade-offs. And so they produce things like EIP 1559. That's the latest. Um, well, EIP 1559 does two things. It increases the fees for users, or like you have to pay extra fees, or it takes money that's paying for security and it takes it and moves it elsewhere.
Mhm.
That's the nature of almost every solution in proof of work and proof of stake. The Bitcoin Cash fork issue a while
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah.
Like that's Omri's solution. We're going to take 8% of the money and we're just going to give it to me.
Mm.
It's like, well, okay, you've just defunded consensus, or you forced people to pay higher fees. And
Mm.
that's the nature of all of the solutions that don't solve things at the economic level. Um,
Yeah.
you know, that being said,
Yeah.
there's probably a role for big permission systems. And Ethereum is probably going to be this pseudo permission system where if you're good with Infura, then you're okay in the system. And the question is like, if you're 20% open, what's that? That's probably good for some stuff, but
Mm.
it's not good for other stuff. And what happens when these half open systems start competing with systems like Sato that are cheaper and more open? We think that's what's going to be the real question in the next 5 to 10 years.
And I think it's not well. Sure, the economic incentive structure is one thing, but it's also that if you just rely on one giant uh, infrastructure provider like Infura, you also
Mm.
basically opening the doors for like technical vulnerabilities to really have a
Yep.
large impact. And it's also what we saw. I don't know when it was, like a year ago or something. I don't even remember when, but we had this bug with Infura, right? And then a lot of users like in their MetaMask. I don't even know. I remember how it was exactly, but they had like different balances or whatever. But then
Yeah.
a lot of users get shocked, right? Like, oh my god, where's my coins? Where's my money? So
Did you?
that's another thing,
Did
right?
you? Yeah. Did you hear about the EOS one? There's another great example from EOS where they're supposed to have all of these servers because we're going to have a constitution. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, constitution, that's not incentives. That's like something you attack. And the
yeah.
constitution says you're supposed to save a copy of the blockchain. And what they had is they had like, at one point, they had one copy of the blockchain because they had it on one computer and they had like 5 different NICs that would all access the same hard drive. So, it's like people faking the idea that there's some decentralized and open network. Well,
Yeah.
why? Because who wants to save that much data? You just fake it. You pretend to, and that people attack the network that way.
But
Um,
yeah, at the same point, I also want to basically point out that I think this really shows, and I want to remind also all the listeners and viewers of this, like this also shows how early we still are, right? How early we
mhm,
still are. This is still very early, immature experimental technology that we're working in that space, right? Most alternative crypto projects barely exist more than 5 years, right? So this is very very new space. And
mhm,
sure, like you're saying, like there's a lot of trade-offs as we try to build the Web3. A lot of
yeah. Well,
projects that are on the surface decentralized are actually under the hood. There's
I
some
mean,
elements that are not, right?
there's so much to dig in here. I'll just make some quick observations. One is a lot of the time when people talk about trade-offs, the trade-offs they're making are being forced by this underlying layer. You
Mm,
know, like Ethereum says, oh, we're going to make this trade-off and we're going to do this so there are more light clients on the network. And it's like,
mm,
okay, you've now added support for light clients, which is forcing people to spend money doing that.
mm,
Where's the money coming from? It's coming from other stuff. One of the fun, Saito, we're focused on fixing things at the economic layer, which means Saito really doesn't have that many trade-offs. If there's more value to supporting light clients, you're going to support light clients because that's how you make money.
mm,
We can get to that, but you know, the second thing I was going to say is I think one of the reasons is a lot of these developers they don't know economics,
mm,
or they've got this really libertarian view, and they think that well, how things should work is how they do work.
mm,
So, like, people who are coming from a really libertarian perspective, it's hard to talk about market failures because they think, well, the market gives you the best outcome. That's what the market does. And it's
mm,
like, you're right, but there are some situations where that doesn't happen. And one of the problems with proof of work and proof of stake is that the incentives actually aren't to do what's best for the network. Like if your the incentive is to do what makes you money. And if the
mm,
incentive that makes you money is different
mm,
from what's best for the network, then you've got a problem,
mm.
you know? And people go, oh, well, that can't be true. And it's like, look at the block size debate, man. You
Yeah,
know,
it's
the
crazy. Yeah,
problem is
yeah.
the incentive, the incentive is to put data on the chain. The incentive is not to have the chain pay for itself forever. There's a difference. And
Mm,
the fact that the incentive is bad means they have to have these technical controls. The better solution is actually just to fix the incentives because then the market actually solves the problem for you. But we can get to this, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we should go a little bit back here, because you already basically explained what Infura is. We talked about Web3, so I think explain us how Saito tries to resolve that, and how Saito is basically um, better than Infura in that sense.
sure. Saito is competing with proof of work and proof of stake. So we're a different kind of network. And in proof of work, you pay for mining, and so you get a ton of mining. In proof of stake, you pay for staking, and you get a ton of staking. What Saito does is Saito is a system that is secure like Bitcoin. It's secure like proof of work. It's secure like proof of stake. What that means is we will guarantee that it costs a certain amount of money to attack the network. So if you're a user and you're making a transaction, using the network, you know if someone is going to cheat you, if you wait for 6 confirmations, it's going to cost this.
Okay.
You wait for 10 confirmations, it's going to cost more. But the thing that Sato uses to generate this cost of attack is moving money and routing transactions. So the people that get paid in Sato are the ones that actually do what Infura does in Ethereum. The most lucrative position in a Sato network is to be the point that people connect to. Because if they give you their transactions, those transactions are worth money to you. But they're only worth money to you if you can quickly and efficiently get them into blocks.
Hmm.
So what Sato incentivizes is you want to make money, that's great. Go help users. Give them the data from the blockchain so that they'll make transactions and they'll use you, and take their transactions and get them onto the blockchain as quickly as possible. And then you're going to make money. And you are competing with every other person who can set up a server and go to people and say, give me your transactions. So what Sato pays for is this stuff that all of these other networks need to pay for anyway.
Hmm.
Ethereum, Bitcoin, they all need to pay for this data routing, but they don't have a way, and so they have these extra fees, or they need to move money around in ways that lower security. Sato says this activity, this routing activity that you need to do anyway, that's what we're paying for. And the mechanism design of Sato which is very different than proof of work and proof of stake, is how do we make that more secure than Bitcoin? Because there's a different challenge because we're just moving money around. So the fundamental solution that Saito comes up with is really interesting. Picture Bitcoin if you could rent as much hash as you want anytime. You're going to have all of these, or Ethereum if you can rent stake, right?
Mm,
You can either rent it
mm,
from the people in
yeah.
the network or you rent it from the market. What you can do is you can start producing blocks, use the income that you're making, and pay for your rental costs. And because you only need to make 51% of blocks, 55%, and you can make more than you can earn up to 100% of the income, there are these profitable attacks where you're really having money moving in circles. And that's the problem that Sato solves.
Mhm.
And by solving that problem, we make it possible to use transaction routing as something that we can use to secure a blockchain. Because what basically happens is if you attack the network, we guarantee that it's going to cost you way more money than you can ever make by getting fees from the blockchain.
Interesting. So it's basically like you're democratizing the meta layer of transactional throughput and data throughput that is
Yeah.
required to achieve that. That's
we're
very
we're sim- we're simplifying things because it's really interesting. A lot of people that are new to SATA, they go, "Oh, this is complicated," because we do things like we have cryptography when you give a transaction to someone else, and they go, "Oh, no, Bitcoin is so simple because you just give them the transaction." And actually, in the real world, that's not what's happening. Miners are hoarding this stuff because they're like, "The fee here, I want the money. I don't want to give it to someone else."
mm,
Um, so people at first look, they can go, "Oh, Sato's complicated. He got this extra cryptographic signature." What's actually complicated is the idea that you've got this external market for hashing and staking that the consensus mechanism has no control over. Like you have no idea what people are doing over there. Do you have 51% of the network colluding? Do
mm,
you have people renting hash, renting stake? And that's what's coming. Slush pool this year is going to have essentially an economic market for liquid options on hash power.
mm,
So you can basically lease or rent as much hash power as you want. And the people that are mining, they're delighted with this because they say, well, we're going to mine for you. We get our 3-4% of profit right away. We
mm,
don't face the risk of if Bitcoin price happens. And it's like people call themselves libertarians. It's like that's what the market looks like. The market looks like what's going to happen outside in hash and stake. But people kind of black box that and they say mining keeps us secure, staking keeps us secure. And Sato says, well, no, actually, it doesn't. Um, it only is secure if you pretend that you don't need to worry about these problems. If we actually solve this fundamental issue, though, we can move security into consensus.
mhm,
And basically, what Sato takes advantage of is we know if you're an attacker and you've been given transactions by other people, you've got a longer routing path than anyone else. And if you start attacking the network and people don't like it, they can say, "Well, I'm not going to give you this work." And you can't do that in Bitcoin or proof of work or proof of stake. If you steal transactions and steal fees, there's nothing stopping you from putting them into a block and making the money yourself.
interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value and a lot of um, yeah knowledge that you're spreading here. I also have to get back and debrief it one by one, which
It's easy.
there's
It's easy. It's you
so
go
much
into Sato.
so much into
Yeah,
it. And I know like the attention span in the crypto space for the crypto community is very, very low. But I love how passionate and how deep you are into this topics. I think it's very important to still also question fundamental infrastructure and architecture as we move forward, even though I
yeah,
think a lot of people are just, scratching on the surface. And that's all fine. I think nobody, like most people don't have the time, they don't have the,
yeah.
commitment or whatever to really go so deep into that. But
Well,
it's really,
here's maybe here's a really simple way to think about it.
yeah,
Your network needs to pay for data. Everyone's network needs to pay for data.
yeah,
The question is, do you get any economic value and security from that?
mm,
Because if you don't, you're going to pay extra for mining and staking. And the fundamental question for scalable application blockchains is how much are you paying? How much does it cost? Proof of work, proof of stake Ethereum, they're adding fees and they're lowering security. Saito says, we're getting security from routing, so it's going to cost you per byte 1/4 of those other chains because there's no extra fees for the network and it's more secure, so you get more bang for your dollar
And then
for cheaper.
how does Sato work on a technological layer? Like, is it chain agnostic, or are you just focusing on one ecosystem? And maybe you can elaborate on that.
Sure. This is kind of where maybe the Polkadot support comes from. The reason people are getting really excited about Saito is because Saito pays for networking. So all of the stuff that people are having trouble paying for, like Infura, well, if you set up your app on Saito, Saito will pay for your blockchain.
Mhm.
The reason for this is you got all these end nodes and to get you to they're competing to get you to give you transactions, right? And well, one way I can get you to give me transactions is the Sato applications I'm running use the Lightning Network, or they use Polkadot, or they connect to this NFT on Polkadot. And so all of a sudden, I've got this financial incentive to run Polkadot infrastructure. I've got this financial incentive to run an Ethereum endpoint because I want you to use me as your application layer on Sato. So the fact that we pay for routing means we can pay for infrastructure not only for Sato itself,
Mm,
but for any other chain that is delivering value that people want to use in applications. And that's where a lot of the gaming stuff comes from because people are using NFT assets in games mostly.
mm,
And that's where kind of it's why the Polkadot people are excited, because parachains are great for NFTs. The big challenge with a parachain is like with Ethereum, how do you really incentivize someone to save the data and give it for free to people?
mm.
And Sato solves that really elegantly. So it's you use Sato for the application, and you can use Polkadot and you can use the parachains for these really specific and really secure NFTs.
Interesting.
So it's
And
a nice combo.
so how far is the product developed right now, and also what are currently your main challenges and your main focuses right now, product wise?
Uh, People can come to sato.io. That's SAT.io. We've got a bunch of applications already deployed. There's a lot of stuff happening in gaming. We're further along, I think, than most people think because
Hmm.
people are used to these projects. They don't have a network and they're a white paper. And it's like, no, there's I mean, we've got people playing games every day, and there's a lot of games. We're working right now on getting really good integration with Polkadot and the parachains,
Mm,
so we can add things like NFT support. So you could create your own chips and you could play poker with that if you want to. And we're working on getting companies to build enterprise applications on Sato as well. Um,
interesting.
yeah, real live network. Come check it out.
All right, and yeah, also you're launching your own token, right? Can you talk us through about the basically the economy and the utility and the whole value of the token in the network, and also like what is the roadmap here? Are you going to do a public sale, or how is it going to get into circulation?
Sure. I think there's short term and long term. We've got a public sale coming up, I think, in 3 to 4 weeks,
Okay.
and then there's an exchange listing that's being set for about 3 to 4 weeks after that. And what that buys tokens that you can withdraw and you can use on the network anytime you want. In all of the applications, if you're building apps, you can build up a war chest. Um, that's the next 2 months. Long term, in terms of the tokenomics of the network and why Sato is really exciting to people when they learn, oh my God, this is how it works, is the applications in Sato are they like run inside your wallet.
Mm,
So people go, oh, wait, this is the Sato, it's a website. It's like, it's not a website. What that is you've started a light client wallet in your browser, and that wallet is showing you the application. And so then when transactions come in, the wallet updates the application. And what that means is there's no Facebook, there's no Google, there's no Apple deciding that you can run this game or that you can run that game. It's fully open.
mm,
And The long-term token economics of where we're aiming the network is you can run whatever applications you want. And if you want some free tokens enough to use the network, why don't you install this advertising module or that advertising module? And you decide if you want it. You don't need it. But if you want a little bit of free tokens, okay, do that. And then maybe when you're playing a game, it will show you ads or ask you to fill out a survey. The advertisers send the users tokens, and the users can use those tokens to make transactions.
Mm.
Uh, it sounds a bit like Brave. The difference is there's no
Yeah.
company like Brave in the middle. The company doesn't exist. You know, there's no company deciding, oh, you get to advertise and we collect money. We're going to give you a little bit of the tokens. It's you decide who you want to deal with because it's entirely open. So
Wow.
that's the first really important difference for utility long term. And it's why when we talk about really scalable petabyte level, we're talking about petabyte level application networks, you need scale because you need this economic model. The second bit, the users have a little bit of the token and they use that to pay fees. And here's the second really, really important thing about why routing is really so revolutionary. Those fees, if you're using Bitcoin or you're using a proof of stake network, those fees pay the miners and stakers. And there's these other people like Infura who have their hands out saying, give us money.
Mm.
With Saito, those fees pay the guy you're connecting to. So all of a sudden, we have a model where the old internet is advertisers pay Facebook and you pay your ISP. The new model is the advertisers pay you, and when you do whatever you want to do on the internet, your ISP collects the money because serving you is how they get paid.
Mhm.
As Saito grows, the model grows because the values of the fees and the values of the transactions grow. So what's your ISP going to do? They get you to use them. Maybe they're going to give you a bunch of free off-chain data. Maybe they're going to give you liquidity on the Lightning Network.
Mm.
Maybe they're going to give you a free mobile phone number because you're China Mobile and they're competing with China Unicom. The market can figure this out. But the long-term tokenomics are that. It's the network gets paid from the token, no extra fees, and the users can buy the token or long-term, they'll be able to earn a little bit. People who really want to be playing with the network, experimenting, using it, this is who the public sale is for because you're going to be able to buy enough to use essentially a lifetime of internet access without advertising, without any of that stuff. Because ultimately the token is zero inflation. So, it's an economy that is getting bootstrapped right now.
Yeah, that's super
Make sense?
interesting. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you summed it up really, really well again. Also, um, getting back to what we talked about in the very, very beginning about breaking up the business models of basically
Yeah.
big tech in the current Web 2 that we have. And I think we have now a very clear image, like how do you plug in and how do you
Yeah.
also plug in within the crypto ecosystem, right? Within the crypto space.
Yeah.
I think that's like two different angles from where you have to consider this, but it's definitely very, very interesting. I'm also going to keep up my research here. There's just so much excitement and great stuff going on in the entire crypto space, and I think what you guys are building, and obviously you're very, very deep into your field and your product. That's something I think I should also, take as a starting point to research and to keep learning about. So that's super exciting. But yeah, to wrap
It's
things off, to wrap things off, because I think wrap things up, because I think also not make this too long. What would be your kind of final thoughts here and final call to actions, and also how can people find you most importantly if they wanted to connect?
Uh, we've got Telegram. Come to saito.io, saito.io, you /arcade. Check out the network. I mean, the big message we've got is, routing work is like proof of work. Like you said, it's really early days. And the people that understand what is happening and why are the people that are going to be leading blockchain in the next decade. Because all of these economic problems are getting worse and worse with proof of work and proof of stake. Saito is going to be helping these networks, but like you said, the idea that everything is solved is only thrown at you in proof of work and proof of stake by people that don't understand the economics of their own systems. So anyone who's really into blockchain, learn how Saito works today. It's going to it's going to change the way you think about blockchain, and things are moving very, very fast. So come check this out.
Perfect, man. Thanks for your time and wish you all the best moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Michael.